Broadcasting from the heart of the nation, in the Hoosier Media Network studios, the next generation in conservative talk radio. This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Yes, it is. What is up, my friends? Welcome into it. Hey, it's another weekend. Hopefully you're having a great one. It's been fun, and now we're into Easter weekend. Can you believe it? All the way through springtime already. Makes my brain hurt with how quickly things are going. Less than 100 days into the Trump administration, and we're still seeing the absolute chaos. So great to have you along, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. So great. We love to have you along. The Voice of Reason, I'm Andy Hoosier, broadcasting right here in the heart of the nation in Wichita, Kansas, at our flagship here at the Hoosier Media Network studios. But we are all over with so many great radio affiliates. And welcome aboard as we continue to do our thing.
We'll do it live,
like we do each and every weekend. Here's how you can find us. Go to our website, HoosierReason.com, HOOSER Reason.com. You can see our list of all of our great affiliates and our partners. You can see our latest blogs and so much more. You can sign up to become the latest Hoosier-holic, which that email goes out at the beginning of every single month. Also, find us on our social media with our handle at Hoosier Reason. And, of course, if you want to find the podcast on this program and all the others, you can just go and type in on any of your favorite podcasting sites, The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier. All right, coming up on the show this hour, we have Mandy Gunasekara. She is the author of the book, Y'all Fired. She's also the former chief of staff to the EPA director in the Trump admin 1.0. We'll chat with her about the latest trade, ongoing negotiations, the reset in the federal government, and so much more, which the Democrats continue to lose their minds on, and it's kind of fun to watch. Yeah. So we'll get to all that here in just a moment. First and foremost, though, happy Easter weekend to you, regardless of fill-in-the-blank religious belief that you have. I don't really care, but it is a holiday, and you can enjoy it. It's always just an excuse to celebrate, right? But there is a reason for the season, at least for us on the religious side of things. So happy Easter to you. I do want to talk about the culture battle going on in the country right now, and we're beginning to win. The question is, how far do we push that envelope, and where do we go from here with this ongoing culture war? A vastly different look in the nation between one administration to another on how we're celebrating Easter weekend. We'll get to all that in just a little bit. But first and foremost, there is some breaking news going on this weekend.
What's trending today?
Yeah, if you have not been aware, there is a temporary ceasefire in Ukraine and Russia with Vladimir Putin saying that he will be doing a ceasefire at least for a couple of days until midnight on Sunday, Easter Sunday, where so far they've swapped over 200 soldiers on both sides that have been, I guess, prisoners of war that both sides have been able to give to each other, and we'll see how long this lasts. Now, that being said, there are two separate things going on that you need to be aware of, and again, this breaking this weekend, so I don't know if anybody else has been able to cover it, which is why we're here on The Voice of Reason. Number one, on Friday, the federal government here, Marco Rubio, our very own Secretary of State, and President Donald Trump, expressed a little bit of frustration with Ukraine because they don't quite get what we're trying to do here. And what we're trying to do is, I know, wild concept, right? End the war in the Middle East, or end the war in Ukraine. End the conflict. Stop people from dying. It's not about choosing sides. It's about actually just stopping the killing all across the board. And if you remember the big drama that happened when Volodymyr Zelensky made his way to the White House, I don't know, about a month or so ago, and sat down with Donald Trump and then tried to attack us because we're just not giving them everything they want. They didn't quite realize that this isn't the Biden administration any longer. So a minerals deal that we were working on got put on hold. We pretty much booted him out of the White House, and then he apologized. Oh, sorry, we're totally ready for peace. We want to work with you guys. We want to make this happen. But I really don't know that he does, because now, according to as of Friday, we had Marco Rubio that was meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky again, working with Ukraine, and proposed some type of peace deal that would actually end the conflict overall, and they didn't quite bite. So, of course, Marco Rubio said pretty much he's going to throw his hands up in the air and say, if you guys aren't willing to work with us, we're not going to help you actually end this.
But we're not going to continue with this endeavor for weeks and months on end. So we need to determine very quickly now, and I'm talking about a matter of days, whether or not this is doable in over the next few weeks. If it is, we're in. If it's not, then we have other priorities to focus on.
Yeah, we got other things we got to do. Got to work on it. So if you're on board, let's get on board. Let's get her done. If you're not on board and you don't want peace and you don't want to stop the conflict, then have fun, do your thing. We got other issues we have to worry about as a nation. And I love this. I was chatting with a few progressives on social media the past few days, and they were throwing out there how quickly Donald Trump's going, how we need to slow down, make sure that we actually have a replacement in place when we end up cutting certain government programs, when we end certain government grants or government contracts. And the story, at least here in the state of Kansas, where I'm from, they were talking about ComCare, our program for individuals with mental health issues that ended up ending and seeing a cutting of their federal funds. And there was a big panic. Our county commission was all about it. We need to find ways to get supplemental funds to take care of this program. And during a conversation that I was having, they said, well, if Donald Trump would just slow down a little bit, we can actually find replacements to start sliding in and transitioning how these programs could operate. And my response has been, yeah, well, that sounds great. If we slow down the progress, nothing will get done. And point in case, look at the past, 4 or 5 decades that we've seen in the country. When we try to cut programs, when we try to get the federal government out of some sort of program that they're not supposed to be in the first place, if we don't do it just like that and do the immediate cut, then it never gets done. Because then there's always the red tape, there's the politicians, there's a new election. It's not very sexy to run on that kind of campaign that we're going to cut this certain program. So therefore, it never gets done. And the only way that government is actually going to see any type of change, which is why conservatives, you and I think we're kind of excited about what we're seeing right now, is the fact that we're not waiting around. We're ripping the Band-Aid off. And while it is causing a little bit of chaos down the road, we can absorb that. We can figure that out moving on. It's the same way with foreign policy. Volodymyr Zelensky, still, for whatever reason, Mr. Comedian himself that's running the nation of Ukraine, for whatever reason, thinks that he's still working with someone like a Biden administration or any other government around the world where he can just go at his own pace. Yeah, I want peace. I want to get peace. I want to stop the dying from happening, while he keeps it on, and he never creates a deal. He keeps raking in more resources. He just takes in more money. He takes in more arms. He lets volunteer soldiers come into the nation, and he just keeps it going. And the Trump administration, which most, for whatever reason, Democrats, the media, foreign governments, they don't realize that Donald Trump is serious when he says the things that he's doing, is that we're not going to wait around and play these games. Do you want a ceasefire or not? Donald Trump wants it. He wanted to do it before he even took office. The media even took a little jab at him like, he said he'd finish it in 24 hours. And yet it hasn't happened. We're 90 days in now, which, you know what? It would have probably gotten done a lot quicker if Joe Biden hadn't have shuffled himself out after the election, when he shuffled himself out of the Amazon forest and was like, Ukraine can now start using our missiles to blow up Russia. That didn't go over well. That didn't go over well with Russia and Vladimir Putin. So nonetheless, now we're trying to deal with this, and Marco Rubio, the tough talker, with Donald Trump, the tough talker, with J.D. Vance, the guy who doesn't take any crap, is sitting down with Volodymyr Zelensky and says, do you want to end it? If so, let's get her done. That was Friday, that clip where he says, hey, we're going to offer you a deal. You have a couple of days to figure it out. If not, we're walking away because we got bigger fish to fry. Guess what? It worked. Breaking news this weekend.
What's trending today
is that apparently that Volodymyr Zelensky and the nation of Ukraine has agreed to the ceasefire deal that Marco Rubio and the Trump administration has officially offered.
Today, we made an offer that the Ukrainians have accepted, which is to enter into a ceasefire and into immediate negotiations to end this conflict in a way that's enduring and sustainable and accounts for their interests, their security, their ability to prosper as a nation. We'll take this offer now to the Russians, and we hope that they'll say yes, to peace. The ball is now in their court. And but again, the president's objective here is, number one, above everything else, he wants the war to end. And I think today Ukraine has taken a concrete step in that regard. We hope the Russians will reciprocate.
All right, that audio from Newsmax TV. So here's where we're at now. We have a temporary 2-day ceasefire. And I know I don't like to talk hard politics on Easter weekend, right? There's so many other things we could talk about, but this is big news because this could be the beginning of a long-term ceasefire. We have two separate issues going on. Volodymyr Zelensky has agreed to the ceasefire with the United States, and now we're presenting this to the Russian government. At the same time, the Russian government has announced the ceasefire that we're seeing just for the 2 days during Easter weekend, throughout Saturday and through midnight on Easter Sunday, where they're swapping different POWs and they're not killing each other, at least for those couple of days. That 2-day agreement is not the U.S. ceasefire agreement that we've made with Ukraine, because now we're conversing on the long-term ceasefire with Russia. In a post, in a meeting with the general staff in Russia, Vladimir Putin has announced, saying, quote, that we assume that the Ukrainian side will follow our example, meaning the 2-day ceasefire for this weekend. At the same time, our troops must be ready to repel possible violations of the truce and provocations from the enemy and its aggressive actions. Ukrainian president, like usual, unfortunately, has come out to say that the ceasefire this weekend is nothing more than, quote, another attempt by Putin to play with human lives. Air raid alerts are spreading across Ukraine. Shahed drones are in our skies, revealing that Putin's true attitude towards Easter and towards human life. So, while they're technically, and I say this in air quotes for the radio listeners here, while they're technically in a ceasefire, I don't see a whole lot of lightening things up, at least right now. That's at least going on this weekend. The question is, can we keep the long-term ceasefire going? And I think that would be pretty exciting. During the ceasefire so far, they have turned over near 246 Russian service members that have been returned back to Russia, the same roughly to the Ukrainians, with 31 wounded Ukrainian POWs being transferred in exchange for 15 wounded Russian soldiers in need of urgent medical care. Overall, Ukraine has seen more than 277 warriors, he uses that term, as returned home from Russian captivity. So they have done the swaps, and now we wait to see what happens. With the long-term peace agreement that's been made, can Russia come to the table now and have this conversation? And again, I'm wondering if Zelensky of Ukraine is actually going to abide by this, because he's obviously very skeptical about Russia, and he doesn't want to give up any land. This is, again, the guy that just refuses to compromise in any way, shape, or form, because he would rather fight and keep the conflict going, knowing that he's getting all these resources, he's getting massive amounts of money to continue to fund his government and fund his conflict. He really doesn't have a whole lot of incentive to want to stop this unless he gets everything that he wants. Vladimir Putin already has the eastern portions of Ukraine, and will he be willing to give those up? Probably not. So what it comes down to is something that Trump's apparently very good at, that the media and Democrats don't give him enough credit for, is the fact that he is the master of the art of the deal and making a deal. Get the ceasefire, allow Russia to hold on to the eastern portions of Ukraine, then negotiate terms to bring them back to Ukraine and have Russian troops back off of those and see where it goes from there. I don't know if that's going to happen, but that's at least part of the negotiation. At the same time, we have Marco Rubio that apparently has been able to also secure the minerals deal, the raw materials deal from Ukraine as well, that will benefit the United States. So things are moving. That's exciting. Going into Easter weekend, I think this is good news that we could see something long-term. And if Donald Trump and Marco Rubio and the entire Trump administration team are able to actually negotiate this full-on deal for long-term peace, this will be something that Joe Biden was unable to do, that he will get credit for putting more peace in the world instead of creating more conflict. And, of course, the media won't give him credit for that. But in the long term, this is going to be a really good deal for the United States and for Eastern Europe. And I hope that we can make actually something like this happen. All right, when we come back, other issues going on around the weekend as well. We have the Supreme Court making a bold decision to cease the deportation of criminals around the nation. What the heck's going on? We'll get to all that and more. It's your weekend edition. It's your Easter weekend edition of The Voice of Reason. Lots more coming up. Stay here.
This is The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier. It's your Patriot on the Prairie. This is The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Yes, it is. What's up? Welcome back into it. Spreading reason, common sense, rationale across the country, all over the place, and it's so great to have you each and every weekend here. By the way, if you want a list of our great affiliates, we have more coming on. I want to say next week we'll have some more announcements. Stay tuned in for that. You can go to HoosierReason.com for that one. So, breaking news, potential ceasefires that we're seeing on Easter weekend. That's kind of exciting. At the same time, on the other flip of the coin, with the not-so-good news.
What's trending today?
Yeah, that's right. Supreme Court making a decision now to potentially stop the deportation of illegal migrants under the Aliens Enemies Act. Yeah, that one doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because apparently if you deport bad guys like gang members and cartel members and illegal migrants with criminal records, then that's really bad, right?
We're all going to die because of you!
Yeah, that's apparently what we have to deal with now. So Trump making a statement on that late on Friday evening regarding some of these activist judges.
I was elected to straighten that out, and I'm doing that. But we have activist judges that don't want murderers to be sent out of our country. They don't want killers and drug dealers and drug lords and people from mental institutions. They want them to stay in our country, I guess. I don't know. Maybe that's the liberal way, or as they call it nowadays, the progressive way. But I don't think it's the way that our country believes, and that's why I won in a landslide.
Here's the weird part. And can we just come to this admittance? I know that this entire week, and I'm sick and tired of talking about it. I honestly haven't talked much about it this week. But this whole El Salvador issue, the guy being sent back there, the court's telling us we have to bring him back. And the Supreme Court apparently making the decision for now, according to Hat Tip to Newsmax, that they made the decision on Saturday this weekend about blocking deportations of any Venezuelans held in northern Texas under the 18th century wartime law, saying the court directed the Trump administration not to remove Venezuelans held in the Blue Bonnet Detention Center, quote, until further orders of this court. That coming from the U.S. Supreme Court. I'm assuming, could be wrong, I'm assuming that this decision is coming from the ongoing drama about this El Salvador guy that was here illegally, that was set to be deported years ago, couldn't be deported because he was in a rival gang of one that was running El Salvador at the time. That gang is long gone. Now he's sent back there, and our courts and Democrats, for whatever reason, have spent all this time saying that he was wrongly sent back because the court said that he couldn't be sent back. And that's kind of crazy to me. Obviously, if you're a criminal, if you're a gang member, which we know he is, even though they try to say there's no evidence to that. Tom Homan was on CNN with Katie Collins talking about that exact issue.
I mean, he could have been deported literally anywhere else.
Again, we keep going back and back, but again, that was years ago. Country conditions were different. That gang no longer exists in El Salvador. He had been designated a terrorist since that time. 2 different federal judges said he's an MS-13 member. A police department said he's an MS-13 member. ICE data shows he's an MS-13 member. El Salvador says he's an MS-13 member. As you know, MS-13 been designated terrorist. The case says the facts of the case have changed since that first decision. So again, I'll leave it up to the DOJ to argue that case in court, but that is where I stand, and that's my belief.
So I'm assuming that the court's decision is stemming off of this ongoing drama to make sure that we're, quote unquote, deporting the right people and that we need to use the right laws to do so. I fail to see how it's an issue whatsoever if you are in the country illegally and have a criminal record on top of that. Not just the fact that you came across the border illegally, which would make you a criminal in the first place, but you have something else topped on top of that. A murder case, a robbery case, an assault case, a rape case, whatever it is, a gang member case, a cartel thing, that if you had why would it be an issue to send you out of the country? The fact that we have Democrats that would rather fight harder for illegal criminal gang and cartel members than they would their own American citizens shows exactly why Democrats lost the election in November, why they haven't rebuilt themselves yet, why they're still going through an identity crisis, and why they're having not a chance of winning an election anytime soon until they figure out exactly who they are and who they're standing up to fight for. Kind of crazy. All right, Mandy Gunasekara, when we come back right around the corner for the Voice of Reason. Stay here.
This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier. Truth, reason, and common sense. This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Welcome back into it. It is the Voice of Reason. I'm Andy Hoosier. Hey, so great to have you along for the ride today, as usual. Really happy to have our next guest on the program. Been a little bit since we've chatted with her, and there is a lot of news going on, obviously, in D.C. The trade tariff negotiations. It's funny how Donald Trump was right again with all of it. And that's where we lead off as we go to our...
Let's go to the Hoosier Media Hotline.
That's right. Really happy to have on the program. She is the author of the book, Y'all Fired, A Southern Belle's Guide to Restoring Federalism and Draining the Swamp. Really happy to have back on Mandy Gunasekara. Mandy, how are you, my friend?
I'm great. It's wonderful to be with you, Andy.
Yeah, it's always good to chat with you. I love our conversation. It's funny how Trump was right again, Mandy. He ends up putting tariffs onto countries for a negotiating tool. Over 75 nations already come back and say they want a trade deal. We're starting to see some of those leak out now as well. We have the battle going on with China, but overall, it seems like things are working out just as the way we predicted.
Yeah, that's exactly right. If only the media would get wind, the mainstream media, I should say, would get wind of President Trump actually being right and instituting a really strategic, well thought out economic policy, which this is exactly what he's doing. And the other piece of this, too, is the tariffs, as they become more established and stabilized. The other thing that he's been floating around for quite some time that's starting to get traction is having enough funds coming in on the tariff side that you can do away with income tax, which would be such a huge benefit to productivity and development here in the country. And that is his focus. It is shoring up prosperity within the borders of the United States of America to help the workers, the inventors, the people who are willing to take chances and start new businesses. That is his daily focus, and that is what is motivating his broader economic policy, which includes these tariffs. It's been amazing to see these countries coming in, having serious conversations and level setting the state of global trade. President Trump is right. For far too long, we have been willing to be taken advantage of, and it's not the fault of the countries. It's the fault of poor leadership or leadership that lacked the ability, direction, and political wins that President Trump currently enjoys to get this done and get it done right.
Yeah, amen to that. You mentioned the taxes. I'm glad you brought that up. Obviously, this week was tax week, a very big holiday for Democrats. They celebrate the fact that all the revenues coming into the federal government. And Donald Trump has talked about many different tax ideas. Obviously, we're working on the reconciliation bill right now that's going to codify Trump tax cuts 1.0, which would be amazing to see, because if not, we could see near a $2,000 average increase on our taxes at the end of the year if we don't actually permanentize or extend those. Then we have the Trump tax cuts 2.0, where he wants to cut taxes on tips, on overtime, Social Security, which would be amazing as well. I'm not quite sure the talking point to the other side, somehow saying that was going to be a tax cut on millionaires and billionaires. Unless you know, Mandy, of a millionaire and billionaire that's having to rely on the overtime and putting in those extra hours to be able to make ends meet. So I'm not sure on that one. But then he's teased about cutting the federal income tax for everyone and supplementing it with tariffs, or at least cutting it for those making less than $150,000. Is that actually feasible? Could we really get to a point where tariffs could supplement our revenue coming into to the federal government?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing about President Trump. He doesn't just say things when he's talking about specific policies. Sometimes in casual conversation, yes, he will say things. And it's the fault of a lot of folks in the media, particularly, and Democrats, to not take his policy statements seriously. His team has thought very extensively about doing away with income tax. And this idea has been around for a very, very long time. You actually have a number of states that have been leading the charge. I live in Mississippi and the surrounding states, so Tennessee, Arkansas, Florida, they did away with income tax quite a while ago, so much to the point where Mississippians, our legislators, just voted to do away with the income tax. I think it's starting in 2026. But nonetheless, this is a trend that has been embraced by some of the states. And if you look at the economies of the states that have embraced this philosophy, they're the ones that are booming, in addition to other conservative policies that are much more attractive for the everyday American to live within versus places like high-tax California alongside crazy progressive ideas and just rampant crime that kind of define that state experience. So this idea has been around for a long time. There's proof of work at the states. And with the tariffs that the president has been talking about, remember, he's been talking about this for 40 years. It's not like he just had this idea. He can use those tariffs, something he's been thinking about and understands for quite some time, to do away with the income tax. As you said, the idea is for those making $150,000 or less, and then create additional benefits that he promised on the campaign trail: the no tax on tips, things that just make sense, not taxing Social Security. I mean, why, after working for so many years and finally being a recipient of Social Security, should you then pay another tax to go, mind you, to some of these organizations that the Department of Government Efficiency has thankfully revealed are rife with waste, fraud, and abuse.
Yeah.
So it really is, it's a well-coordinated, a beautiful strategy that I know we're going to see play out quite well.
It's nice to see the entire strategy start in the reset button essentially being hit. My only concern, Mandy, and I hope that we get to this point, like you said, if we end up cutting this federal income tax, is how much money will we have to cut out of the federal government? Well, before we had the federal income tax in the early 1900s, we didn't have this fourth branch bureaucratic state that we had with all these different departments and agencies and the size of government that we have now. So could we run into a shortfall? Will that increase the debt, or will we actually be able to get the huevos essentially to go and actually slash the budget enough and cut agencies enough to balance the budget with only tariff revenue coming in?
Yeah, I think so. And I see the vision for sure. And then, that's why what the Department of Government Efficiency is doing, exposing and it's not wholesale getting rid of programs that actually provide important services to the American people. For example, the left has been on a tear for the past week or so saying that Social Security is going away. That's just simply not true. Going in and finding fraud and waste and getting rid of that actually strengthens the program. It makes sure that the people who are entitled to those funds actually receive it, and that the program itself has a higher degree of integrity that the American taxpayers and those who will depend on it can believe in and rely on. And so that's why a lot of what the Department of Government Efficiency is doing, it's going to be important for Congress to embrace this as well. So they have an important role in all of this. Certainly, they are dealing with a lot of the tax discussions right now as they're going through budget reconciliation, but solidifying these long-term cuts and downsizing the federal agencies. Now, the president and his team, they have a ton of executive leeway to reduce the size and scope, the footprint, if you will, of the federal government. They can close offices. They can move offices. They can get rid of full-time employment roles that don't meaningfully contribute to the actual mission of the agency, which is what they're doing. Things like shutting down DEI offices and environmental justice offices that have popped up in some of our environmental and energy cabinets, such as EPA and the Department of Energy and Department of Interior. Those are the things that the executive branch has a significant amount of leeway. But long-term, cutting the budget, Congress will absolutely have to step up and be willing to embrace the good work that Elon Musk and his team has already done. They've actually, rolled up their sleeves and dug in ways that has seemed virtually impossible. Yeah. Speaking as a former chief of staff that used to review these budgets, I remember looking at them and just thinking, how am I supposed to have a picture of how much money we actually have and then how to effectively deploy those funds so that we are actively supporting the president's agenda? It was quite difficult. So they've done the hard work. It's up to Congress really to step it to the plate to ensure that these cuts are long-term and we have that balance the president so desires.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, and hopefully we can keep this momentum going. We're talking with Mandy Gunasekara. She is the author of the book, Y'all Fired, A Southern Belle's Guide to Restoring Federalism and Draining the Swamp. Also the former chief of staff to the EPA under Trump administration 1.0. You mentioned Congress. Let's go there for just a moment. Obviously, with the trade deals, we've already seen some of the pushback. Mandy, are you concerned about the unified Republican agenda pushing for the Trump goals of what we have? And why is it so difficult, do you think, for people to understand why Donald Trump's doing what he's doing? Like you said, this is 30, 40 years of him saying the exact same thing. He's been very consistent on his plans with tariffs, negotiation, battles with China, trade deals, the trade deficit that we've had. He's been very consistent for years about this. And then we have Congress, specifically the Senate, with, Don Bacon. We have Jerry Moran. We have Mitch McConnell. We have a bunch of others that voted against him, trying to take his tariff ability away because they don't like what he's doing. Why are we still fighting amongst ourselves here, Mandy?
It's an unfortunate characteristic of the Republican Party, but it also breeds independence, which is another important characteristic of the Republican Party. And look, these guys they're being responsive to politics. Yeah. And the president's long-term vision is going to require some short-term discomfort. And, you've had courageous groups like our farmers step up, certain manufacturers, some of the auto dealers that are saying, look, we're on the front lines of the economic impacts of these tariffs, but we understand the long vision. And for too long, especially you talk to dairy farmers in the Wisconsin area. I used to meet with them when I was a staffer, a worker bee on Capitol Hill. They used to come in and talk about the fact that they were subject to double-digit, if not triple-digit tariffs from Canada trying to sell their milk into that market. So those farmers are willing to do with having to shift around contracts in the short term or some instability in the short term for the opportunity to eventually be able to sell into the Canadian markets and elsewhere and not be subject to these punitive tariffs that the farmers had to deal with without the support of the leadership in this country for far too long. So back to Congress, though, there's members of Congress that are more susceptible to the whims of politics. It's unfortunate to see, but it's always going to happen. It is something to pay attention to, not necessarily worry about, but, I think that these folks go home, they don't know how to defend the policy to angry constituents, and they come back to Congress and they're going to do something, by goodness.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. We've been scared of our shadow as a Republican Party for a really long time. Mandy, hang on the line. Got to take a hard break. It's Mandy Gunasekara right here on The Voice of Reason. Stay here.
This is The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier. Where Hoosier-holics gather every week. This is The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Yeah, welcome back. Got a few minutes left here as we wrap up things for this hour. As always, really happy to have on here. Love chatting with Mandy Gunasekara, former chief of staff to the EPA under the Trump administration 1.0 and author of the latest book at Y'all Fired. Mandy, we talked about the scared shadow of the Republican Party. We've been that way for a long time. Let's shift gears to what's going on now. The reconciliation bill process, the one big beautiful package where apparently now we have some moderate Republicans that are coming out in the House saying that they're not going to support the one big beautiful package if we have any type of Medicare cuts in the program. But at the same time, we still seem more unified in the House party, even though it's a slimmer majority, than we do in the Senate majority of the Republican Party right now. But with the way the Republicans act, with the way that they're working with the Trump administration and trying to get these things done before the end of the year to codify the Trump tax cuts, to get this reconciliation bill done, and to actually get, a somewhat balanced budget. What's your thoughts? Do we think we can actually get this done? And what does that future conversation look like?
Yeah, I think we'll get there. And I think the biggest thing is you understand it and your listeners will understand it. But this isn't just about extending good policy. It is avoiding a major tax hike starting at the start of next year. So as long as the American people, the average American person understands that and they're letting their member of Congress know that, they're going to be extra motivated to ensure that taxes don't go up leading into the start of an election year for members in the House, which is probably why they are paying a little bit more attention than some of the members in the Senate. But this is the nature of the Senate. The old saying, the Senate was designed to be the cup that you pour the hot tea in so it can cool. And so they take their time. They're going to wrangle a bit. But I do think eventually they'll come around because at the end of the day, this is a pro-growth, pro-domestic policy that the president, he's not only been talking about for a long time, he started a lot of this during the first Trump administration, but this is what he was constantly talking about on the campaign trail and why so many people came to the polls to vote for him because they were tired of the direction this country was going, economic issues, inflation, lack of opportunity, the DEI limiting the ability of people to get good ideas out into the marketplace. That's what people are done with. And so eventually, the Senate, they're going to take their time, of course, but I see them coming around and this getting done in time to not only avoid the tax hike, but to solidify these long-term benefits so then the president can focus on other things.
Well, it's a direction we have to go, and even Democrats, which I think hell froze over this week, Mandy, when we had the governor of Michigan with Gretchen Whitmer openly say that she actually agreed with Donald Trump on the tariffs. Why? Because the vast majority of her constituency and union workers and the auto industry are loving what's happening right now with the reinvestment in the economy, the remanufacturing, the trade deals that we need for raw materials. She even came out and admitted, yeah, I actually kind of like what Donald Trump's doing right now. And if those Democrats are getting on board, it should be a sign that Republicans should be as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think eventually they will. Look, he's gonna change the nature of the Rust Belt. It's not going to be the Rust Belt. It's going to be the working belt once again. And he's hyper-focused on that. He also understands that a lot of those workers were the people that the second round America First Division expanded to include in a significant way. And so that, again, is what's motivating him. I'll tell you really quick, when I had to go in and brief him on some international climate policies, one of the things he always came back to, and he asked me this 2 or 3 times in a direct conversation, what is this going to do for the American worker? That is where he starts from so many different policy decisions. And I think that commitment to increasing real income, reducing inflation, making Americans who work hard feel like they are successful as the work that they put in for their family and community. I think that's something that he is constantly thinking about. And so his domestic policy reflects that. And anyone who is the slightly savvy politician, they see this, someone like Gretchen Whitmer, I'm not surprised that she's out there praising the policy decisions because it's going to benefit not only her constituents, but her state writ large.
Well, of course it is. And she's got to start playing nicely on the other side because of obviously the unions are leaning towards Republicans now. They're supporting Donald Trump. And I smell the desperation with Democrats losing support left and right. It is Mandy Gunasekara. Go check out her book, Y'all Fired. Mandy, it's always good to talk to you, my friend. Happy Easter weekend. Let's get you back on the show and do it again real soon.
All right. Sounds like a plan.
Very good. There she goes. Mandy Gunasekara. Again, she is the author of the book, Y'all Fired. She's also the former chief of staff to the head of the EPA under Trump administration 1.0. And if you have not heard her story, it's pretty brutal with how the deep state really treated her. Not Donald Trump himself, but the deep staters within this fourth branch, this bureaucratic state of government, how they treated her when she was in that office in that first administration, which why, again, it needs to be the reset that we're seeing in Washington, D.C. and get rid of the crazy deep staters in that fourth branch of government, that shadow government that we continue to see peek its head out and fight against the ongoing Trump administration. But we're out of time for this hour. Back at it again here real soon. Until then, be your own voice of reason. This is the Voice of Reason. It's time for you to speak up, speak out, speak loud, speak proud, speak the truth, and always speak some reason. It's the Voice of Reason. I'm Andy Hoosier. We'll see you on the radio